My brother slept with my wife during our honeymoon and thought I would never find out. But when I exposed his betrayal, I made him lose everything, including his family and his future. Everything seemed perfect, you know? A honeymoon on a paradisiacal beach, the salty breeze, the sound of the waves gently crashing against the sand, and me, wearing a smile that almost hurt from overuse. Newlyweds, full of hopes and dreams, like those cliches you see in movies. It was the beginning of what was supposed to be the perfect life. But, of course, life doesn't always follow the script we write in our heads. Sometimes, it's an absurd spectacle penned by a cruel scriptwriter. It all started with a small detail, a message on my wife's phone. Nothing alarming at first, or so I thought. She quickly hid it, but not before I caught a glimpse of something. A name? A photo? I wasn't sure. What I did know was that my gut sounded the alarm. That uneasy feeling you get when something isn't right but you can't quite put your finger on it yet. Despite that nagging doubt, I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to seem paranoid, right? But, as they say, the truth has a way of surfacing, and in my case, it decided to reveal itself in the most brutal way possible. 2 days later, while we were in the hotel lobby, I saw something, or rather, someone, that froze me in my tracks. My brother. Yes, my own brother, in the very place where only my wife and I were supposed to be enjoying our newlywed bliss. My first thought was that it was a pleasant surprise. Maybe he'd decided to visit us, a coincidence perhaps. But no, his expression made it immediately clear. He wasn't there by chance, and the way he looked at my wife screamed more than I could process at that moment. I tried to act normal. "What are you doing here?" I asked with a nervous smile, while my wife suddenly found herself intensely interested in anything other than the conversation. He stammered something about a spontaneous vacation, but I wasn't convinced. There was no way this was just a coincidence. Something else was going on. The next night, things began to unravel. During a romantic dinner we'd planned, she kept receiving constant messages on her phone. She tried to play it cool, but her discomfort was palpable. That was the moment when my curiosity turned into suspicion, and my suspicion into a cold determination. I decided I needed answers. After the initial shock, I realized I couldn't move on with my life without seeking the truth. That betrayal wasn't just a stab to the heart. It was like someone had dismantled my entire world piece by piece. But instead of wallowing in my pain, I resolved to investigate. I told myself, if they played me, I'll play them, but with intelligence. It was time to uncover just how deep the betrayal went. I started paying attention to the small details, replaying the past weeks in my mind. I remembered how my brother, always so arrogant, had begun making uncomfortably personal comments about my wife during family gatherings. At first, I brushed it off, thinking it was his clumsy attempt at humor. But now, every word, every gesture, took on a whole new meaning. Then there was her, my wife. Her behavior had changed too. There were excuses. "I'm tired. Your brother was nearby and gave me a ride. I didn't want to bother you." Little lies that, when examined closely, painted a complete picture of someone hiding something big. But what truly opened my eyes was a message I found by chance on my wife's phone. She'd left it unlocked on the nightstand. While she was in the shower, my instincts got the better of me. And there it was, a message from my brother, filled with affectionate phrases and a very specific reference to our honeymoon. My blood boiled, but I decided to stay calm. I wasn't going to act without more proof. It didn't take long to uncover more. I went through our honeymoon photos, especially the ones where my brother had insisted on being included. Who brings their brother on a honeymoon? Well, apparently I did, the idiot of the century. In several photos, he was standing too close to her, with a smile that now looked predatory to me. Everything fit together, and what had once seemed like paranoid exaggerations were now undeniable facts. My brother and my wife had something going on, and it had started even before our wedding. I couldn't confront them yet. I knew that to truly bring them down, I needed solid evidence. I started collecting proof with surgical precision. I reviewed bank accounts, messages, shared phone locations. I found more than I expected. Payments my brother had made in her name, hotel reservations during times I was away for work, Even a getaway the two had taken together while I thought she was visiting her mother. Each discovery was like a direct blow to the chest, but it also gave me the strength to move forward with my plan. I wasn't going to explode in a fit of rage. No, this had to be done right, in a way that would make both of them feel the full weight of what they had done. This wasn't just about confrontation. It was about delivering a lesson, one they would never forget. I kept acting as if nothing had happened, even with my heart in flames. I became the ideal husband and brother, all the while plotting how to destroy everything they thought was secure. My goal wasn't just to confront them, it was to expose them, to make the whole world see how despicable they truly were. I hadn't just lost a wife, I'd lost a brother too, and I wasn't about to let that go unnoticed. The confirmation that my brother and my wife had been together during our honeymoon turned my world upside down. In the silence of my home, after digesting the betrayal, I decided that if they had planned to play me, then I would play them, under my own rules. I spent weeks acting as if nothing had happened, facing the daily routine with a calmness that, to an outsider, might have seemed admirable. Inside, I was burning, but I was also meticulously planning every detail. If they were going to get what they deserved, it had to be unforgettable. My brother was known for being a man who thrived on appearances, respect, and admiration. He had always carried that arrogance, that belief that the world owed him something simply for existing. And my wife, well, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was cut from the same cloth. She was obsessed with maintaining a perfect image, with making people envy us as a couple. Now I understood why they were so comfortable together. They were two sides of the same coin, consummate narcissists. The first step of my plan was to disconnect emotionally, but not in the way they might expect. I didn't become distant or cold. On the contrary, I drew closer. I acted as the understanding brother, the hurt but resigned husband. I even had lunch with them on one occasion, pretending not to notice the nervous glances they exchanged. I wanted them to think they had the situation under control, that I was broken but harmless. Meanwhile, I worked behind the scenes. I knew my brother was about to close an important deal for his company, one that would catapult him to new financial and social heights. And guess who held the key to whether that deal succeeded or failed? Me. It turned out that the partner my brother was negotiating with was an old friend from university, someone with whom I had shared not only good times but also secrets. One of those secrets was my knowledge of my brother's reputation as someone untrustworthy, not just in personal matters, but professionally too. I arranged a meeting with this partner in a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes. During our conversation, I brought up some of my brother's past incidents. Small stories that might seem trivial but, in the right context, painted a concerning picture. For instance, how he had manipulated a former employee into taking the blame for a financial mistake, or how he had deceived a major client to close a deal. I didn't have to lie. The truth, well presented, was enough. At the same time, I began laying the groundwork for the big reveal. I knew that simply confronting my brother and my soon-to-be ex-wife wouldn't be enough. They would deny everything, fight tooth and nail to defend themselves. I needed irrefutable evidence. I turned to a tech-savvy friend to help me retrieve messages and calls they thought they had deleted. What I found was even worse than I had imagined. Not just affectionate messages and compromising photos, but conversations where they mocked me, plotted how to hide their relationship, and discussed how to divide what they thought would be my assets after the divorce. I stored everything in a folder with backups on several devices. I couldn't risk losing this information. Every message, every photo, every audio recording was a nail in the coffin of their supposed innocence. And all the while I kept smiling, kept pretending, because the perfect moment to act hadn't arrived yet. I was building a house of cards for them, but I needed them to feel completely safe before I knocked it down. The internal tension was unbearable, but there was also something darkly satisfying about watching them walk confidently into their own downfall. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to confront them yet. The truth, when the time came, would speak for itself, and they wouldn't have a leg to stand on. Everything started spiraling out of control as I began piecing the puzzle together. This wasn't just an occasional betrayal. It was premeditated, constant, and, worst of all, shameless. My brother and my wife hadn't just taken advantage of the trust one gave them. They seemed to revel in keeping their relationship right under my nose. I discovered messages, photos, even payments he made for gifts and dinners during our honeymoon, a time that was supposed to be the pinnacle of our love. But it wasn't just that. As I dug deeper, I stumbled upon something that made my blood boil. My brother had apparently used my own money to fund part of his affair with my wife. He had forged documents and made transfers from a joint account I had set up for family emergencies. He hadn't just betrayed me as a brother. He had stolen from me, manipulated me, and laughed behind my back. The revelation left me completely disoriented for a time. I couldn't fathom how someone, especially a brother, could cross so many lines without feeling a shred of remorse. But then I remembered something crucial. I'm not the kind of person who just stands idly by. If they thought they could get away with this, they were sorely mistaken. I decided that simply exposing them wasn't enough. I needed to do something that would truly make them understand the magnitude of what they had done. I began planning my revenge methodically, taking every piece of information I had and using it as a weapon. First, I ensured that they no longer had access to my finances. I froze joint accounts, blocked credit cards, and notified the banks of potential fraudulent activity. Then came the most delicate part: how to confront the family without being seen as the villain. I knew my brother was a master at playing the victim, and my wife, with her charisma, could convince anyone she was just a poor woman trapped in a complicated situation. So, I gathered evidence, not just to protect myself, but to make it undeniably clear that there was no room for misinterpretation. The next step was to organize a family meeting. I knew it would be risky. Getting the entire family in the same room could unleash chaos, but it was necessary. This wouldn't just be a confrontation. It would mark the beginning of a war, one I didn't plan on losing. Meanwhile, my brother and my wife kept acting as if nothing had happened, enjoying their little bubble of illicit happiness. They had no idea what was coming. With the discovery of their betrayal, I had already begun preparing my revenge meticulously. However, there were still moves to make on this emotional battlefield. The conversation with my parents had been an unexpected turning point. Initially blinded by my brother's charm, they were now beginning to see the true nature of their son. This gave me a renewed sense of urgency. If I was going to fully expose my brother and my wife, I had to make sure every detail came to light. Meanwhile, my brother, oblivious to the machinations against him, continued with his life, convinced that everything was under control. Although rumors had begun circulating within the family, he maintained a facade of normalcy. My ex-wife, on the other hand, seemed increasingly nervous. She knew I wasn't the kind of person to simply let things slide. Her paranoia grew day by day, especially as friends and acquaintances began to distance themselves from them. It didn't help that I had started dropping cryptic hints on social media. Enigmatic messages, photos with important people, and an air of absolute confidence that made them feel cornered. The pivotal moment came during a family gathering, ironically organized by my brother to smooth things over. This event would serve as the perfect stage for my masterstroke. I arrived calm, with a folder in hand containing irrefutable evidence. Screenshots, emails, text messages, and even recordings that clearly exposed what had happened. I had also prepared a video presentation with all the evidence but had no intention of using it yet. My plan was different. During dinner, I listened patiently to my brother's hypocritical words as he tried to project the image of a misunderstood victim. My parents, though present, seemed increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, he made a joke that crossed every possible line, something about how he'd always been more charming, which is why women preferred him. The room burst into awkward laughter, but for me, that was the signal. It was time. With an unnerving calm, I stood up and began to speak. I didn't raise my voice or show anger. I simply let the words flow, loaded with truth and precision. Every sentence was like a direct blow to my brother's ego and my ex-wife's reputation. I revealed intimate details that left everyone stunned, from how I discovered the infidelity to my brother's attempts to sabotage my career. Then, as the final nail in the coffin, I placed the folder on the table, inviting everyone to see the evidence for themselves. She tried to justify herself, but her trembling voice and crocodile tears convinced no one. My brother, meanwhile, resorted to anger, accusing me of being manipulative. However, his outburst only made things worse for him. My entire family, at last, took a clear stance. My brother had crossed an unforgivable line, and my ex-wife was nothing more than his accomplice. By the end of the evening, they both left humiliated, knowing their lives would never be the same. Meanwhile, I remained surrounded by my parents and other relatives who, for the first time in a long time, seemed to understand and appreciate everything I had been through. When I returned to the city after my extended getaway to disconnect, I felt as though nothing could surprise me anymore. I had learned to let go of the heaviest emotions and focus on moving forward. But life rarely respects our plans. That morning, as I entered the office, the atmosphere felt strange. I noticed the nervous glances from my employees and the murmurs that quickly died down as I walked past. I chalked it up to everyone still adjusting to the leadership transition I had implemented after the conflict with my brother. But what I discovered later left me speechless. On my desk was a stack of documents. Among them was a letter from my lawyer, who had uncovered something unexpected. It turned out that my brother and now ex-wife were plotting a new scheme, attempting to challenge my control over certain company assets by alleging fraud in the transfer of ownership. I couldn't help but laugh out loud as I read it. It was almost pathetic. After everything that had happened, they still thought they could outmaneuver me, as if I hadn't learned from their first betrayal. However, it was no time for jokes. I decided that if they wanted to play strategists, I would show them they were entirely out of their league. Instead of confronting them directly, I ensured I gathered all the evidence necessary to prove their attempts at manipulation. Thanks to well-maintained legal and financial records, I had a rock-solid case that could dismantle any claims they tried to make. Meanwhile, I couldn't help but notice that my ex-wife had entered a complete downward spiral. She was no longer the confident woman she once projected. She had lost access to the comforts and lifestyle she held so dear. Even her friends, the same ones who used to laugh alongside me at pretentious dinners, were now avoiding her. It was clear that she was paying the price for her own decisions. My brother, on the other hand, was also facing harsh realities. His impulsive behavior and inability to maintain professional relationships had turned him into an undesirable figure in the business world. The tipping point came when they tried to arrange a clandestine meeting with some of my business partners. They hoped to convince them to break ties with me and work directly with them. What they didn't count on was that one of those partners was also a close friend who immediately alerted me to their intentions. The opportunity was too perfect to pass up. We organized a surprise meeting where I showed up unannounced, leaving them completely stunned. At that moment, I confronted my brother and my ex-wife, making it clear I was aware of every single one of their moves. The climactic moment arrived when I presented the evidence I had gathered. Not only were they exposed as conspirators, but their reputations were completely ruined in front of everyone present. My brother tried to justify himself, while my ex-wife broke down emotionally. Instead of feeling satisfaction, I felt a profound sense of relief. It was as if an invisible weight had finally been lifted off my shoulders. In the end, I didn't destroy them entirely, even though I had the chance. I chose to move on with my life, letting them face the consequences of their own actions. There was something far more powerful in showing them that my life didn't depend on their approval or their presence. I had found a new perspective, a peace I wasn't willing to lose. As I walked out of that meeting room that afternoon, I felt I had finally closed that chapter. The betrayal had left scars, yes, but it had also made me stronger. Now, I was free to build a life truly worth living, surrounded by people who valued my loyalty as much as I valued theirs. Thank you for sticking with me through this intense story. What are your thoughts on everything that happened? I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. See you in the next one.